I've always been suspicious of the idea of writerly presences that mysteriously hang around in the ether long after the writer has disappeared. But here on Jura, Orwell's scent is very strong. This is the room in which he wrote his final novel. Finishing it, chain-smoking as he sat hunched over a paraffin heater, nearly killed him. The working title was The Last Man in Europe. It was published 6 months later as 1984.
It's a wonderful view.
Like looking through a window pane.
I'm sorry?
It's a quotation from my own work. The last refuge of a desperate middle-aged writer.
There are no photographs of Orwell's life on Jura, but this film, starring Ronald Pickup, explored his time on the island and was shot on location at Barn Hill. Although Alan Plater's script sticks closely to the known facts, it's still difficult to separate the Orwell myth from the reality. This is the Corrie Brecken, the channel that flows around the northern coast of Jura. At certain times, the tides make it highly dangerous to shipping. Orwell came this way in the summer of 1947, returning from a camping expedition round the coast with his nephew, his niece, and his 3-year-old adopted son, Richard. They were shipwrecked, and halfway through the writing of 1984, its author nearly drowned. According to the Orwell legend, the boat was caught up in a giant whirlpool, but the location of the island from which he was rescued suggests a slightly different story.
Orwell was coming up the west coast, and as they came through the gap between the large island and the small rock, which is the Bougie Rock, they had a notion to collect puffins' eggs. And they turned the dinghy around sharply. It had a small seagull outboard, which, to my way of thinking, hadn't been secured properly. So when she was turned sharply into the island, the outboard came off.
Mike Richardson has lived and worked on Jura for over 25 years, and as a sailor, he has his own particular view of the incident.
The person who was holding the painter had to leave go to help the survivors get onto the shore. And while doing so, the dinghy went, and they were stranded on the island for a number of hours till they were picked up by a lobster boat. And
that's interesting, because the man helping them onto the rock was Henry Dakin, Orwell's nephew, who's left the only written account really of what happened. And his account suggests to me that they were actually in the whirlpool itself before coming out and ending up on the island, which doesn't square with the geographical reality as you've just described it. It seems to be another one of those grey areas in Orwell's life where we know something happened. We know there was an accident here, that he was washed up and rescued by a lobster boat, but the actual reality of it seems to be beyond us now.
He was very self-destructive. He'd messed up his motorbike, the van was out of order.
He always tried to give the impression of himself as a practical man, couldn't he? He could mend things and put out shells, but you give me the impression he was rather cack-handed and
he was destroyed everything that connected him with the mainland, you might say, you know. It was a very, very strange atmosphere.
David Holbrook is one of the few people to have encountered Orwell on Jura. As a 23-year-old, he went up to visit his girlfriend, Susan Watson, Barnhill's housekeeper. When you were actually staying on Jura was the time he was begun to write the early drafts of 1984. And am I right in thinking you actually saw that manuscript?
Yes, I went up to his study one day. I think he was out. And there was this battered old typewriter with the thing about Winston, you know.
What do you think about 1984 as a novel now, 50, nearly 60 years after you saw it on the typewriter in Jura?
Well, it seems to me paranoid, you know. I suppose some of it's come to pass.
The irony is that although it wasn't a prophecy, it's full of prophetic statements. Deforestation, the treatment of dissidents in mental hospitals, the breakdown of the nuclear family, the distribution of habit-forming drugs, the degeneration of language, and perhaps especially the waging of wars on the fringes of the big empires. The one I like most, really, has only come true quite recently. He forecast there would be a lottery, a national lottery. for which, for the proles, would be their delight, their folly, their anodyne, their intellectual stimulant.
1984 contains some brilliant insights, in particular his concept of newspeak, the reshaping of the language so as to make truth inexpressible. All that is going on all the time, and he summed that up brilliantly.
Well, now, for one example, just take the word good. If you have that, what need for the word bad? Ungood does just as well. Then instead of a string of vague extra words like excellent and splendid, you have plus good, or stronger still, double plus good. In newspeak, the whole notion of goodness and badness will be covered by 6 words. In reality, by only 1 word. Don't you see the beauty of that, Winston?
Winston, like Orwell himself, is a very nostalgic figure. Winston is still hanging on for an old world of, as it were, traditional values of integrity, honesty, straightforwardness, character. And actually, Big Brother is saying, there really is no such thing. These really are wishful fantasies.
Double think. Crime stop. Ignorance is strength.
Whether it's a prophecy or a warning about the loss of decency, I think one of the keys to 1984 lies in Orwell's own deep-rooted paranoia. Throughout his life, he took a lively interest in them, malign exterior forces with the capacity to eavesdrop on the doings of ordinary people. And even on Jura, he was convinced that his mail was being opened and that visitors were communist spies. The world of 1984, where telescreens keep the downtrodden inhabitants under constant surveillance, and history changes whenever those in power find it embarrassing, is the world of Orwell's worst nightmares. A world in which authority can open a window into your soul, especially in room 101.
What is in room 101?
It's the thing that you most fear, most hate. It can be death by drowning, death by fire, death by impalement. I think that's a marvellous one. Death, well, I don't think it's marvellous, but death by impalement. But you said, or it could be quite a trivial thing.
Rats, murmured Winston. In this room. They're all over the place, said Julia indifferently as she lay down again. Some parts of London are swarming with them. Did you know they attack children? In some of these streets, a woman daren't leave a baby alone for 2 minutes. It's the great, huge brown ones that do it. And the nasty thing is that the brutes always... Don't go on, said Winston. Of all the horrors in the world, a rat.
Orwell, it's fair to say, was obsessed by rats. An unappeasable, furry brood runs through his work. A letter to a teenage friend gives precise instructions on how to hunt and kill them. And later a soldier in Spain is described as trying to evade bullets in the way that a rat crawls under a door. In 1984, this obsession culminates in Winston's encounter with Room 101.
As you will see, this is a mask. It fits over the head, leaving no exit. When the plastic door is raised up, the rats will shoot out like bullets.
Julia, not me! Julia! I don't care what you do to her! It's Julia! Julia, not me! Not me!
1984 was finished by the end of 1948. Orwell lasted another year, at first in a sanatorium in Gloucestershire, and then here in University College Hospital, London. He died of a lung hemorrhage in January 1950. 3 months before he died, he married Sonia Brownell, 15 years younger than him, who spent the rest of her life in a ceaseless quest to burnish up his reputation and memory. And perhaps at the very end, his mind moved back through the cloud of the years, to older and even older memories, to the rain falling over the grey sea off Jura, to the thump of the bombs going off in the streets beyond Piccadilly, the lofted torches in the great square at Barcelona, the electric shock of the bullets slamming home, his mother's shadow falling across the garden, and the sound of the nightjars on summer evenings in the lanes, and the woods and the streams of Oxfordshire.